Hi guys, another episode of Altitude and Trails podcast, episode number 10. And we are a little international today, pretty international with Patrick Turner today. Hi Patrick, how are you?
Not too bad, mate. How and yourself?
Good, good. So we decided to just move a little bit to far away. And the reason is because actually, recently I've been posting about what is happening in New Zealand. I've been posting about this Malayan Tahr situation, and so I decided to just talk a little bit with someone, a Kiwi, 100%, Patrick. For the Instagram followers, is anyway we're gonna write your name is Paddy Gone Bush, right? Paddy Gone Bush, right?
Yep, Paddy Gone Bush.
Paddy Gone Bush.
BDY. Yep.
That's good. So yeah, we met in October when we were. I was hunting with Ulrich, and it's just Patrick is a friend of Ulrich. We met there. We just have a couple of beer. He introduced me to some kind of really good Japanese whiskey. I still remember, and so just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we go boom into the topic.
Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Patrick. I grew up in the North Island of New Zealand on a sheep and beef farm. Been hunting pretty much all my life. My old man got me into it. Initially just chasing animals on the farm, and then progressed into a bit of bush stalking, chasing deer. First deer was a seeker in the Kaimanawas. Moved down to Christchurch to go to Canterbury University to study geology and some languages. And then from there, I'm an exploration geologist, working in the gold industry and working in and out of New Zealand, Australia, and Southeast Asia, and currently pretty much just solely in Australia for work. With the lockdown, I'm working from home in New Zealand, so I've been able to get out a little bit more than what I have been over the last few years, but it's been really good. So yeah,
Pretty good. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, you said that you're an hunter 100%. Actually, you're born you started pretty early age to hunt, and
yeah,
so now your situation is a pretty similar to a lot other recreational hunters, passionate hunters that are in New Zealand, because this situation it got probably to its peak. So Tahr, this now again with this kind of matters, Tahr culling, Tahr no culling, Tahr eradication. Just give me a little summarize what it actually is happening for probably the people that are following us. They really don't know what is happening in New Zealand right now.
So I'm gonna plug another podcast here. Educated Hunter, which is run by a couple Kiwis. They've had Willie Dooley, who's a spokesperson from the NZ Tahr Foundation on, and they've done a half hour, 35 minute chat, which basically breaks down everything, all the history of the Tahr in New Zealand, and it's really knowledgeable and really good information. But effectively, Tahr in New Zealand were liberated in 1904, 2 males, 4 females, and then progressively in like 1909, and then 1924, there's been a couple other liberations as well. Initially, it was in Aoraki, Mount Cook, where one of our national parks are, and from there, the numbers have grown. Initially, the animals were gazetted as a game animal, and they weren't allowed to hunt them, and then progressively they started hunting them. In 1937, I believe it is, Tahr along with red deer and chamois and other animals within New Zealand were deemed more as a pest, and they were handed over to the New Zealand Internal Affairs, and from there a lot of culling started happening. Initially, it was ground hunting with the culling, and that was basically just ground hunters who were spending extensive periods of time in the bush or in the mountains, and they were ground shooting animals and taking the tails. That progressed in the 70s through to aerial, either wild animal recovery operations or so pulling out the carcasses and selling them for meat, or actual culling as well. So, and the
So sorry
for Tahr as well.
to cut you. So that means that actually the hunters were on the ground shooting them, and then the helicopter would
Yeah.
just like keep taking all the carcass and then
Well, yeah, yes, and no. So in the case of deer, there was a big meat industry. So a lot of ground hunters would go out for the weekend to supplement their income and they'd shoot animals and then bring them out whole, carrying them out whole.
yeah.
And then you also had a case of in the commercial side of things where they were shooting them outside of helicopters. So they'd be on the skid of the helicopter flying around and then shooting them, and then you'd have somebody jump out and basically gut them, leave the organs in there for hygiene purposes, and then you'd see that quintessential photo of a number of carcasses hanging under a helicopter and flying out of the mountains. So that still happens today with wild animal recovery operations for chamois and red deer in New Zealand, and I believe there was some for Tahr as well. Effectively, by 1983, the animal numbers for Tahr were so low that they were virtually gone from New Zealand. There's a moratorium on them, and basically from there they realised that there needed to be a bit of more of an understanding of making sure all the stakeholders, so Department of Conservation, the hunting groups, commercial and recreational, the local iwi, which is Ngāi Tahu and the South Island and Canterbury, worked together, and from there they had the Tahr Control Act, and then they came up with a plan in 1993. Now, this is where a lot of the conjecture and contention is really coming from, is with the Tahr control plans. At the time, with the population surveys that we were doing, is that you'd have a couple scientists go out into the hills, they'd look at an area, do a count on a square kilometre of how many animals they are, and then they'd extrapolate it across the whole feral range. So from the Landsborough in the south, and then all the way up into the Rakaia. And with the control plan, they also deemed that was just going to be the feral range, and then anything outside of that, they didn't want the Tahr spreading any further. So from there, obviously, if you've got too many animals, you're going to have overgrazing, and then the vegetation has a lot of problems and can't sustain the population. So with that, and the science at the time for what they were doing in 1993 was pretty good. So they used a guesstimate of about 10,000 animals, and that's the number that they were like, right, we're ideally, with the science that we've got at the moment.
There was the limit to keep.
That's the limit.
Okay, 10,000.
Part of that, so part of that, just needing to make sure I've got my notes here. So part of that was there's supposed to be a 5-year review after 1993. So in 98, there's supposed to be a 5-year review. There's supposed to be vegetation monitoring, and there was also supposed to be Tahr population monitoring. And make sure that the numbers weren't getting too much. And then with that, they were able to talk within the different groups. And if there needed to be management, i.e. culling, they were able to do that. What has happened is, I believe there's been about 7 plots. Each, I think 6 out of the 7 plots were overgrazed, and that was because there were too many Tahr for the density expected. And the reality of it is like, you're talking a very large feral range. Now, the animals are going to be in pockets, not going to be spread evenly across the range. There's going to be areas where down in the river valleys of the braided rivers, they're not going to be living. They're not going to be on the extreme peaks. They're going to be with it where the vegetation is and the rocky outcrops and where they are. So it's not a 1 and 0 black and white issue. There's a lot going on here. So effectively what has happened is different governments have had different conservation ministers. Different conservation ministers have had different amounts of funding within DOC. without getting into the politics, it basically means that you'd have some who are not having the money but want to do things, some having the money not doing things, or in the case which is arguably now is that Department of Conservation, DOC, who look after all the public land within New Zealand, are probably getting to a point where they're as well funded as they've ever been and still underfunded. They've got a large amount of ground that they've got to look after, and it's not just Tahr that they're targeting. They're targeting the other pests, obviously. So you've got your mustelids, you've got your possums, rats, mice, whatever, and a lot of it's to save our birds and our native flora. So, which they do a fantastic job for that. It's sometimes the ideological side of things gets in the way of probably looking at a more scientific view where you're having a bit more stakeholder engagement. And that's basically where I feel from what I'm reading and what I'm seeing is that, like, the hunters in New Zealand, of course you're going to have extremists who are saying don't cull at all, and we just want to see lots and lots and lots and lots of animals and be able to go shoot whatever we want. And then you've got the majority of us, which I feel is we're a lot more moderate in saying, hey, look, yes, there are too many tahr. Like the area that you and Ulrich went, I've been in there. There's been areas there where I've seen 100 tahr in 500 meters by 500 meters. It's too many.
They are actually really. You can see the impact on some of the valleys. I mean, I've seen that.
Yeah. And there's no understory like where you were. Like I've shot a couple nice tahr out of there and with some mates, and there's no understory in the vegetation. All the scrub, pretty much 1.5 meters high, is eaten down. It's down to dirt. There needs to be culling. Like there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Where the point of contention becomes is density. And the reality of it is the 1993 Tahr Control Plan, if you read it, and you read it without a greenie, forest and bird, let's get rid of all pests within New Zealand, and you read it without a hunter, I just want to be able to go out and see animals and hunt and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And be cowboyish, because that's basically, we're pretty cowboyish with how we do things in New Zealand on the hunting side of things. And we'll get into that later on. Is the plan was not a draft, but it was there so that in 98, after 5 years, they could review it and go, hey, look, 10,000 is too many. Or actually, we could hold 15,000 in, but in these certain areas that were, like in some places with national parks or significant other areas where ecologically there's a buttercup, a alpine buttercup or whatever, which is threatened. We need to make sure that area has no tahr. In other areas we can have slightly higher grazing rates, so we can have a slightly higher density. And that review just hasn't been done. And effectively what this whole petition on change.org, which is run by the Tahr Foundation, and that's what the court action that the Tahr Foundation are really doing is basically saying, hey, stop with what your current plan is, because the 2020-21 plan is basically no tahr in the national parks. Cook. Now, Westland, that includes all of the tahr ballot blocks, which effectively, because they're wilderness zones, you can't fly into them at any other time of the year apart from those landing spots, unless it's a ballot time, in which case you've got to put in for a ballot, and there's 5 or 6 periods of a week, and that's through end of April through to July. And basically the guys that are doing that are ardent tahr hunters, and pretty much only tahr hunters end up going into these areas. So from there, it all comes down to is the plan needs to be reviewed. But if we carry on with the cull that's been proposed on this current plan for the 2021 year, there's not going to be enough tahr when you start looking at what the numbers are since the 2018 cull, which is where the whole Tahrmageddon, and it got really political within New Zealand. And I think worldwide within the hunting community, we started seeing that, hang on a second, management of game animals in New Zealand needs to start happening.
Yeah.
So to give a few numbers from there, in 2018, Doc came out and basically said, hey, look, we think there's somewhere between 17,000 and 55,000 tahr in the country. The 95% confidence interval saying about 35,000 tahr.
But sorry to cut you.
They wanted to come out.
Yeah, to cut you here, but that's the things that fascinated me. So actually, all the data that comes about the numbers of tahr, they are on the Southern Alps. Okay, so are based on what?
Yep.
Are based on what? I mean, when you hear, we think about they are around. So it's that data, it comes out of what?
So as I said earlier, initially in the early 90s, how it was you'd have a couple ground scientists and they'd look over an area, do counts, and then extrapolate that. Now they're using a helicopter, and you'd fly through your different parts of the ranges, and then you'd do visual counts, and with a helicopter you can chase them out of the scrub, and you get a lot more accurate number.
Yeah.
The issue is part of this whole 93 tahr plan is that in the population monitoring has been inadequate. It hasn't been consistent, and you're only getting a snapshot in time. So in 2018, they'd done a couple years of monitoring, and then basically they said, hey, look, we think there's between 17,000 and between 55,000.
Okay, got it.
And with the 95% confidence interval that you're looking at around 35,000. Okay. In the 3 years since 2018, there's been about 18,000 shot. So you'll see numbers between 14 and 18,000, and effectively it's just basically on the date ranges of whether you're including early 2018 or whether you're not including 2018 with the 18,000. But from those numbers that have been shot, you've got the culling that's been done by Doc and its contractors. You've got any commercial hunting as well, so that would be for wild animal recovery operations. You've got the guiding side of things. So to have a concession to guide on New Zealand public conservation land as a hunting guide, if you're to shoot a bull tahr, you're obligated to shoot 3 nannies. Okay, so doing
each
that,
bull tahr,
and then it's also
3 nannies, right? For each bull tahr,
3 nannies.
Okay,
Correct, yep.
3 nannies. So, okay.
And the nannies obviously are your breeding population. So
okay.
This is all to try, obviously, because we were well aware that there's too many tahr. But that's just a fact. We know there's too many tahr,
Sure.
and we've seen it. But it's all anecdotal evidence, and we don't actually have the full scientific monitoring that's required. And then also from the ballot blocks on the west coast and Taiputini National Park, the Westland National Park, and part of that is that when you do your ballot, you're obligated to pass on the number of animals that you shot, whether the bulls, whether their nannies, to Doc, and that they use that number. The Game Animal Council. So this is another organisation within New Zealand. So the Game Animal Council, which is a government entity, which was set up in 2013, are heavily involved in this as well. So, and one of the stakeholders, and that's for all game animals within New Zealand. Now, they set up a app for the hunters, for just ground recreational hunters, where you can put down whether it's a juvenile, whether it's a male or a female, and your location. And from that, they got the amount of kills, and a lot of hunters in the last couple of years have really been going out and making sure that we're shooting nannies in an effort to show, hey, look, yes, we as hunters we have a stake in this, and we really do want to show that we do mean business, and we're actually wanting to, facilitate in the management of these animals.
So that application was launched, 2 years ago or 1 year ago?
That was launched 2 years ago, 18
Okay.
months ago. The numbers that are in that app are not included in the 18,000. Okay, so what I'm getting at is the 18,000 that have been shot. It's a conservative number.
Yeah.
It's not including what the recreational hunters have been doing for pretty much all the feral range except from the Tahr ballot box.
Okay.
So the couple animals that you and Ulrich got, the animals that I've shot, the animals that all of my mates shot, whoever, all of the European guys who are coming over and doing DIY stuff, they're not included. So effectively what's happened in the last fortnight, 2-3 weeks, is Forest and Bird, which is a ecological organisation, non-government organisation within New Zealand, they've taken a court action against DOC to ensure that bulls are shot in the Tahr management, basically, in the culling. From that, and we won't get into the politics of Eugenie Slade, and who's the Minister of Conservation, and her being ex-Forest and Bird or anything like that. I'll just lay it out as much as I can. So Forest and Bird is saying, look, we want bulls shot under the National Parks Act from 1977, sorry, which basically said all introduced species must go. And their court actions picking parts of the Tahr Control Plan and the National Parks Act and the Wild Animals Act and the Conservation Act, and there's a whole things that it's just cherry picking things. So 2 days from when the plan, the DOC plan was supposed to be released, Tahr Foundation were given it. So effectively, a draft was given. The DOC had been talking to Ngāi Tahu, DOC had been talking to Forest and Bird, DOC had been talking to the New Zealand Conservation Society and a few other things, but they'd not passed on any of the information that they were basically leaning towards of what their plan was going to be for the 2020-21 financial year. And Game Animal Council and Tahr Foundation basically got it with 2 days to consultate on, and then that's where the whole furores turned up, and we've said, hey, hang on a second, this is basically wiping them out of the national parks, and so Westland and Mount Cook-Aoraki, and it's pretty much, and the rest of the feral range, putting them down to a 5 animal per square kilometre density, which compared to how they are now is a lot less. And they're like, okay, we'll go back, we'll rework on it. And then effectively there's been no change. An hour before it was supposed to start on the 1st of July, the rest of the stakeholders got the final plan. And that's where New Zealand Tahr Foundation have basically said, we're doing a court action because there hasn't been proper consultation. This has been ramrodded through, and this has been effectively... DOC have basically gone, and when I say DOC, I'm not talking the rangers, the guys are boots on the ground doing anything. I'm talking the upper echelons and the ones that are really pushing for this. DOC are saying that we're getting rid of pretty much all Tahr. Now, some of the numbers that are being still portrayed within New Zealand media are saying that there's 35,000 Tahr. That's incorrect. The statistic modelling and the population monitoring that's been going on at the moment is saying that with the culling that's been happening since 2018, we're looking at 20,000 Tahr, and of that, because the previous culling has been focusing solely on nannies and juveniles where you can't tell the sex, we're looking at 5,000 breeding nannies, so that's your breeding population.
Yeah, that's the source of the population.
And 15,000 elk.
Yeah.
So I'm not a biologist. I'm just a guy who licks rocks for a living. From what I understand, with Tahr, is that it's about a 50-50 when you have your nannies have kids, basically. So whether they're going to be a male or a female, it's about 50-50. So that's probably showing where your population demographics kind of need to be, about 50-50. And currently we're sitting at a 3-to-1 ratio, bulls to nanny. If we're believing the statistics of the population, and that's with another 95 percentile confidence rate, confidence. So yeah, so effectively at the moment we've got a very bull male heavy population. We've got a smaller breeding population, and we're just needing to basically say, hey, hang on a second, let's take 5 minutes, let's figure out which areas need to be culled more, which areas don't need to be culled as much.
Yeah.
Let's find out what is actually the appropriate levels. Can we hold 15,000 tahr within the whole feral range, or does it need to be 5,000 total? But excuse me, we need stakeholder engagement within that, and it's not just stakeholder engagement and going, nah, we're doing it our way or the highway. And this is where I think the Tahr Foundation and Game Animal Council have been really good, is that they are moderate and they're saying, hey, look, we're not denying tahr need to be managed. It's just how much. And that's a question that everyone's asking. And if we're turning around and saying, hey, look, let's get rid of all of them, the low-end estimates of what the tahr industry, and I'm talking commercial guiding industry in New Zealand, is 17 million. High end is 100 million.
Yeah, that's good.
So
kind of a bit
we're looking
there.
from yeah. So and okay, so with COVID and the whole virus and everything, pretty much the whole hunting industry and the guided hunting industries down the gurgler. It's not happening this season. And I talked to my taxidermist mates and other friends who are within the industry, and 95% of their business, which is overseas hunters, is gone. It's gone.
95.
Yep, 95% of their business. So
Wow.
one of my friends who's a taxidermist, he was expecting 500 animals to come through his door over the April-May period.
Wow.
And majority of that's from safari parks and free range hunting on properties, but also public land hunting. And that hasn't happened.
But so at this point, Patrick, I can see one thing actually, because it doesn't need to be like actually a scientist now to understand that this is a complicated situation, and to achieve a goal, a solution, actually that needs a little bit of time. That means that different parts has to sit around the table and try to understand how to deal with this complicated situation. But now I have the feeling that actually there is a part that is pushing more towards the eradication of what is categorized pest or introduced species. Because after all the data that you give me, and after all the history you gave me about the tahr since the introduction into the New Zealand land, actually, it looks like it's a lot more difficult than expected to find just a middle ground and say, like, look, because the terrain it varies, so it means that there are some lands that are different patterns compared to the other terrains and other spots. So some valleys actually they are more impacted compared to other valleys. So that means they have to be managed completely different because the impact is a lot more heavy. So how can you, if you just go like this, like taking an extreme position and say that, okay, we go further to the eradication, actually that is taking a position that it's we are talking about rushing here, rushing into some kind of decision. That this decision, that actually, that's my point. The question I want to ask you is this. I'm gonna get to the point. That after impacting that 5,000 on nannies, okay, probably there's no more future, or the future is going to be like on the hedge. So what about all the consequences? I mean, New Zealand, since the introduction, has evolved, has changed. The culture probably changed. The hunters get used to more get used to this species, the Tahr, and they change their lifestyle, business, family as well. So all this big amount of reality is like an avalanche of a mountain there. It's like, well, what is going to happen there? I mean, someone is asking. I mean, that's my only question that out of this podcast is this: that can someone give the answer to that? Because otherwise, after a COVID, we're not talking about normal situation. And New Zealand was tra la la, so happy having so many tourists and say, wow, we get so good season. And now after the COVID, they have to face this situation, and so the consequences. I don't think is going to be like something easy to deal with, right? Or it's just my impression.
No. Without getting political.
No, I don't want to be political. You know my style. I don't want to get political.
But what I'm getting at, it is political. It's political. And again, I'm going to say, if you want to hear facts, history, why ideologically things are actually happening like this, go listen to the Educated Hunter podcast with Willie Dooley.
Yeah, listen to that. Yeah,
he breaks it down, and he breaks down basically where our conservation minister's putting things, and this has basically been a vendetta that she's had for a number of years. When she was an employee of Forest and Bird, and some of the more extreme sides of Forest and Bird and DOC and those within the conservation portion of New Zealand society wanting to basically get New Zealand pest-free by 2050, which is, let's be honest, being pest-free would be fantastic, but how realistic it is, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the question.
And I think, personally, I'm a hunter, so I'm going to be biased here, and I love hunting tahr. I think there's other animals like possums, like rats, like stoats and ferrets that have a greater impact, and that's where it becomes arguably. Because from an ecological point of view, tahr impact the environment with the vegetation that they're eating, the tussocks, the native flora and everything. So from their point of view, and that's where you need to read that Wild Animal Act 1977, the National Parks Act, the New Zealand the Conservation Act, and everything like that. And it's basically saying there needs to be, how was it put? It was put in a way that it was saying that ultimately there needs to be engagement within the New Zealand society, so the state, between the stakeholders, in our case, Department of Conservation, your Forest and Bird type, and your hunters. But ultimately, the fauna and flora, the native fauna and flora come first. It's basically what it's saying. I'm going to go round and round in circles here because you can't really put your finger on what it is, and my interpretation and somebody else's interpretation,
exactly.
And depending on where their biases are going to be, it's you're just going to go round and round in circles.
True.
Effectively, going back to the numbers, 5,000 nannies. Now, I've heard through a friend of a friend of a friend that up the Rangitata, which is one of the most accessible areas that we can go hunting on the east coast for tahr, is that in the past week, so since the 1st of July, that 1,600 nannies have been shot. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But if we're talking 1,600 nannies already, well, out of the 5,000, again, it's yeah. But again, I don't know whether that's true, and then how much of it, all of what we're getting is conjecture and half truths and full truths and stuff. It's really hard to filter out with what's actually going on. So that's where I'm saying it's political. Well, a lot of it's political, and it comes back to it's just like who the conservation ministers are, what the funding is, how things are supposed to be happening, different interpretations of the tahr control plan. It effectively what we're getting at is it's not a 1 and 0. It's not a black and white issue. It's very grey, and getting everyone to sit down and have a chat. That's basically what we want, and that's what the court order by the Tahr Foundation is basically saying. Hey, look, guys, hang 5. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's sit around the table. Let's make sure that the 50,000 big game hunters within New Zealand, and I think that was from about 20 years ago. That's the estimated number of how many. That's the only number I could really find at the moment. But like about 50,000 people within New Zealand hunt big game within New Zealand. So that's North Island and South Island. But from there in the last few years, there's been a real uptick in the numbers of who are really starting to chase tahr as well, and we can see that as well with advent of social media, the introduction of a lot of young guys coming through, especially Europeans and Americans who are coming through doing their own DIY hunts within New Zealand, like yourself and Ulrich, who are coming over as well. So. And that's not the commercial side of things with the guiding, whether that's be safari parks, free range, or public land. So it's a very complicated issue.
So how you feel about? I mean, you feel about it is going to be just like a tahr issue, or this thing is going to spread to all the other different species. I mean, I'm talking about big game, red deer, chamois.
Yeah, and I'm shaking my head already, mate, because the rumour mill has it that they're going after Seeker and the beech forest up in the North Island next. Like, it's now. Since you and I spoke a couple of days ago and said, hey, look, let's do a podcast. Like, I've been reading the Wild Animal Act. I've been reading the National Parks Act. I've been reading the Conservation Act. I've been reading our the Game Animal Council Act of 2013. And everyone's saying these big game animals are a pest. They're pest. The status is a pest. The pest. I can't find it. The only bit that I can find is that under the Wild Animal Act that tahr, deer, chamois, pigs, goats, they're deemed wild animals except from deer when they're inside an enclosed area, so they're farmed. Okay. The other bit that I can find, and if somebody wants to point this out to me and I've got this completely wrong, please do, okay? But the only other bit that I can find is that in the Game Animal Council Act within New Zealand from 2013, when they set up the Game Animal Council, so the government entity that the government is obligated to listen to on these things, whether it's to anything to do with hunting or game animals, basically. So whether it's the conservation, whether it's firearms issues, whether it's management, whether it's monitoring, etc., and they're basically made up of stakeholders within the hunting industry, whether it's commercial or recreational, whether it's conservation related or whether it's management related, etc. Within that act, it specifically states that tahr, deer, chamois, and when I say deer, I mean all I think it's 11 species within New Zealand, are deemed as game animals. And part of that act is to set these is to set up herds of special interest, which is basically saying these areas, these animals, and it has to specify what animals and the range that they're in are deemed as special interest to New Zealand hunters as big game. My understanding is that what we were looking at for that was the Fiordland Wapiti, which are managed by the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation, who have got a really good relationship with Doc down there, and part of their management is that they cull 1,000 animals, and they're looking typically to cull the red deer type out of Fiordland, so that you've got, for the Fiordland Wapiti, you've got more Wapiti type bloodlines, but the reality of it is it's a hybrid now.
Okay.
I believe it also included the Wakatipu whitetail, Himalayan Tahr. I believe Seeker is another one that they were looking to do. And I think there was discussion about, say, some of your Otago red bloodlines and your Rakaya bloodlines as well. So these herds of special interest haven't been established yet because, again, it gets political. We've had a conservation minister who's pretty much come in and said, hey, look, we're not setting up herds of special interest under my watch. It's not happening. So, and I believe that's correct. If I'm incorrect on that, please, if somebody's listening to this and able to actually tell me,
below,
please.
And I mean,
yeah, let
the debate is open.
Yeah. See, I've got round and round in circles now. I've kind of lost my train of thought. What I'm getting with all of this is that it's not simple. None of this is simple. And this is, look, I'm just a geologist who looks for gold for a living and who's interested in hunting and hunted all of my life. And these are just my interpretations of what I'm seeing and what I'm reading.
But you are a good example, actually. You're a huge example for all the community, actually, because already I'm impressed about the knowledge that you have on the matters, and I would love that 90% of the hunters of our community will be the same in Europe, that they know what is happening in terms of conservation and in terms of the management. So it's impressive, actually. I mean, I called you a couple of days ago, and then you are summarizing the situation, and wow, in clear way, and then showing all the different points that is true. I mean, if I am on the other side, I can't give you the solution right now. I can't. Actually, I think the solution has to be achieved with a group of people, and that group of people has to start and work together for
and that's all we're asking for.
Yeah,
is we're not saying with the stop the cull court action and the fundraiser or anything like that. Is we're not saying let's not cull, let's not manage, let's not do any of that. All we're saying is, hey, hang on a sec, guys. Let's take a breather. Let's have this cup of coffee and let's actually think about this, because if we go down the path that we're going down at the moment, in 2 or 3 years' time, even if they turn around and say, hey, look, we're going to shoot 20,000 nannies or whatever it works out to be, or we're increasing the helicopter hours by threefold in the compared to the 2018. So this is the thing. In 2018, they shot X number of animals under the culling side of things. 18,000 is the total when you include everybody except from the recreational side of things. This Tahr plan from 2020-2021 is a threefold, so 3 times the amount of helicopter hours. Now, with the lower density, you're going to be doing more hours per kill and the helicopter, etc. But if there's only 5,000 nannies, and we shoot all the nannies, in 2 or 3 years' time, 4 or 5 years' time, when all the recreational guys and all the guiding and everything like that shot all the bull Tahr, what's left?
Yeah.
So
that's why it sounds like eradication.
It is. It's not management. It's not culling.
No.
It's eradication.
Yeah.
It's elimination.
But
and that's scary, because and you and I have spoken about this off air as well, is that in the Himalayas, where in their native range, they're near threatened. There's only 1,000 to about 1,500 animals left.
Yeah.
Okay, I think in Argentina and maybe California, there's some minor herds, but these
Small
aren't
populations.
established
Yeah.
herds.
Yeah.
They're not established
No.
herds, and it's only in New Zealand. And we wait. This pisses me off. New Zealand hunters suck.
What
We really suck.
what I can see is
Convicts.
that the angry that you're sharing with all different, a lot of other New Zealand hunters, because I've spoken with them a little bit on Instagram. What actually it's really the big side that makes every hunters out there really sad is that why you're not considering me. I mean, I'm part of that conservation. I live that. I am most of the year we are out there. We seen that. We're living it. So yeah, feeling that you're putting a part and just like there is a part in taking the decision and say, nah, it's like that. Finish. You know, making this what you said is not black and white. But it is like, okay, it's black. Boom, we go. It's I think it's the sad part that you are living, that you are feeling and sharing with all other camarades of New Zealand, and actually that is the thing that make the hunters really angry. But look, this thing is happening in Europe as well, because I mean probably in the future and next future I'm gonna have a podcast with another hunter. We're gonna talk about reality of a European country. And during these days, he said to me that actually some kind of similar things are happening in this country. And I said, yeah, we have to talk about that because I'm interested. So that's why I push on my post, I push on my stories, guys. Look at what is happening there because that is going to be an example. Whatever you are interested in on Tahr, that's not the issue. That's not a problem. I mean, actually here the big picture is that how management conservation can be impacted by a wrong decision, because after that you can go back.
There is no right or wrong decision. It depends on where your views are and what your biases are. Now, all we can in the Tahr side of things, all we can kind of ask for is that there's enough Tahr for us as stakeholders, as hunting stakeholders, that there's enough for us to be, and this is where the Tahr control plan is basically saying. It says this as well, is that there's enough for us to hunt, but that the ecological, the environmental side of things is not negatively impacted to a degree as well. So, and it's just finding where those crossover and finding that ideal number.
So actually, it's a balance.
And it is all about balance.
Yeah.
Now, coming back to say the European side of things, I'm not well read up on it, and that's just reality of how hunters are, and this is kind of where I'm wanting to lead with this as well, is that we only look after our backyard. Like even within New Zealand, like we've got guys who are directly affected with the Tahr side of things they're getting fired up. But then you've also got guys in the North Island or even some of my mates who hunt Tahr here. It's just like that they're not sharing, they're not signing petitions, they're not fundraising, they're not doing anything like this to try help. And it's just because, whatever. And it's frustrating. Okay, maybe they're not just as passionate as I am. Maybe they are. Maybe they can't afford it. They don't have time. Right. I don't know. But the other part and we've discussed this as well, is just like there's been some some guys who are pretty big on social media who have come over from Europe, come over from the States. Are they helping out? They've come over. I know of groups of young guys who have come over from Europe. They've gone up creeks on the west coast and they've shot untold amounts of tahr, chamois, deer, whatever. We're not hearing anything from them. But why aren't they turning around and saying, hey, look, come on. Now, I know New Zealand we don't have a tag system. We don't have a big game license system. It's basically a free-for-all. You can come over, do whatever you want, as long as it's ethically correct and you're not torturing animals and pretty much like that. You can hunt. You can turn up. And currently, turn up and shoot a whole family of chamois or a whole family of deer or tahr or whatever, and there's no restrictions. But ethically, like 99% of guys aren't going to do that. But like you came over last October, we met. You've been over previous to that as well. You're getting fired up about this. You're actually reading up on this. You've donated. You're signing the petition. You're spreading the word. You're trying to help change with the guys that you know over there. But there's some other pretty big names out there that aren't doing anything. It's frustrating. It is really frustrating. And I'm not big on social media or anything like that, but it's frustrating to see that there's a lot of guys who are willing to come over, stroke their own egos, whatever it is. But when time comes to basically turn around and help out, it's not happening. And that where is money talks. And that's where basically I think in New Zealand we need to really start talking about a big game license. So on public conservation land that we start looking at doing a big game license, because it's only then that we can turn around and say, hey, look, we'll pay for research, we'll pay for the population monitoring, we'll pay for management in whatever way that needs to be, whether that's culling, whether that's habitat restoration, whether that's whatever it needs to be. And that's a conversation that is very heated over here. We've grown up that you can grab the 22, go shoot whatever rabbits you want to go. You go pretty much anything unless it's a game bird on a hunting side of things. You can go do whatever you want. Now, Fish and Game, which is another entity that organisation that we have over here, they run the trout fisheries and salmon fisheries and the game birds. So your ducks and quail and pheasants and stuff like that. Yeah. I love my game birds. So for that, I pay I think it's around $100 fee. In Canterbury, it's a 3-month season, and we've got bird limits and per day, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Now, with a public big game license fee, however you want to call it, if there's 50,000 hunters who hunt public land in New Zealand, if you do a $100 fee, that's $5 million. Now, talking with some friends who have gone through and done PhDs or been to university and stuff like that, look, you're looking probably around $500,000 to have a professor, 2 to 3 PhD students, expenses, transport, scholarships, that type of thing. And it'd be about $500,000, I think. This is just back of the envelope numbers. So again, don't quote me on this. To have say three PhD students go out and do monitoring and write theses on say whether it's deer numbers, tahr numbers, chamois numbers, etc. Now, where would that money come from? If Doc, like I've said previously, has been underfunded and it's still underfunded, and they're as well funded as they've ever been now, and they're still underfunded, where's the money coming from? We as hunters can't turn around and say, hey, Doc, you need to go do this. And it's just like, how are we paying for this?
Yeah.
And like, I'm not up on all the intricacies of the European systems, because again, every country has a different way of managing them. Yeah. But like, there's certain things within the American system that of game animals is that we really need to start looking at in New Zealand. Like, okay, they've got their tags, they've got their licenses and everything like this. And again, hunter education. We don't have hunting education here. Like,
True.
I'm just going to go around in circles with this. But effectively, if we can get a big game license, if we can turn around and fund it where we're going, hey, look, we've got tahr, we've got chamois, we've got too many of these, we need population monitoring, we need vegetation monitoring, we need management. whether it's habitat restoration, which I don't think necessarily needs to be done unless it's going to be really difficult, but the management's more going to be culling, basically, or changing population demographics. Where that funding comes from, I think they also need to look at something like the Pittsman-Robertson tax that the states brought in the 1930s, and I think it's like 11% on all rifles and ammunition, and like 10% on handguns or something like that. But if we were to bring something in on like that on firearms, ammunition, hunting-related sporting equipment within New Zealand, and have that money go to the Game Animal Council, have a big game license of $100, $200 per annum. Again, and I'm not saying like, oh, all of a sudden you're only allowed to shoot one deer or one tahr, this, that. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying just have a license. So if you want to hunt public land in New Zealand, you're paying this amount, and it's for the year. Doesn't matter how many animals you shoot or whatever. We can work on that later when we actually have some science behind us and we can look at the demographics of the populations. And then with the overseas guys who are coming in, who are doing these DIY hunts, who aren't going to the commercial guys and using guides and all that type of stuff, I'd like to see you'd have a higher price for your license, because it's we in New Zealand pay taxes, which already goes to DOC. We've got a better understanding of what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of analogies and the parts that we can pick from the different systems and different ways of managing animals overseas that we could implement here, and then we'd have a better chance of turning around and saying, hey, look, guys, what you're doing with the tahr at the moment, it's not good enough. We as the hunters need a stakeholder engagement and money talks.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee I'm going to get a lot of hate mail about this, because people do not like the idea of it.
I understand that.
Like my best, like some of my best mates are okay with it, and other guys are they just look at you and they go, you're ruining New Zealand hunting if you all of a sudden turn around and say you're putting a license. But the way I see it is we can't turn around and say and want to have a say if we're not funding it, and if we're not being able to say, hey, look, this is actually the science. And I'd like it to go through the Game Animal Council, but there needs to be utmost transparency, complete transparency. And it's not getting Game Animal Council to have some of their own scientists doing it. I'd be wanting the research to be done by, say, Landcare Research, different universities, unbiased, unpoliticized entities or organisations, non-government organisations or universities, so that you can turn around and say, hey, look, we've just had $5 million worth in licence fees. $4 million's gone into research and management. These are the guys who are doing the management. Here are the books. Here's the reason why. This is it. And basically whatever's gone into the just the office expenses, stuff like that.
It's a really interesting view that you just show us right now. And actually, when you say that you have some friends that they told that this was the way to just kill probably the New Zealand outdoor hunting, how you want to call it. Actually, I don't think it's really true, because look at how we're in New Zealand right now with a huge problem.
Exactly.
So because there is actually, if political or not political, there was a lack of management.
Oh, for sure.
So
and we as recreational hunters have not been. Some of it's access. We can't get into the areas. Some of it's just the terrain's horrendous, and you just can't do it unless you're full on ISEX crampons. Like, I went down to Cook last week to go for a hunt, but I had two young guys with me. We didn't do a lot of hunting. Turns out my front base on my rifle was loose, and I realised it in the car park, and had to come back and resight the rifle in. But bit of a piss poor effort on my behalf. But full on ISEX crampons, and I've got guys who've never used ISEX and crampons with me, and it's just like, well, it's middle of winter. Tahr and bull rut. We've got to climb 1,500 meters just to get amongst them, and ice and snow. And if you haven't been in that type of terrain before, good luck.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
one of my friends a month ago was put into an avalanche. Him and his mate were caught up in an avalanche, pretty beat up. Another one of my friends pulled a PLB, so personal locator beacon, or his Garmin InReach, but they pulled that up in Lewis Pass the other day. This wasn't chasing tahr. This was just looking at chamois and deer. Sorry. So, like, the terrain in New Zealand's horrendous if you don't know what you're doing, or if you get yourself into a sticky situation. And a lot of guys, and this is good from New Zealand hunters, that we're walking past a lot more animals now. But that also means that there's a number of animals there that are not being shot that 10, 15 years ago that the guys might have taken a pot shot at. Ethically, it's better, but like on the same side, management-wise, if there's too many animals, what are you to do? Is it for recreational hunters to turn around and shoot excess numbers, or do we think we should have a better way of managing these numbers and we're actually looking at what's being shot and the demographics? I know which way I'd be leaning.
Yeah, but in terms of if you want a healthy population, the density is always a problem. Always a problem.
Exactly.
Because you there. I'm not going to open this topic, but actually, some of these tahr, they are next to the farming land, right? In farming land, probably they have even some kind of density. But if you don't manage both of them, I'm saying both of them, the farming animal and the wildlife in a good way, I'm talking again about the density, and then you're gonna have the cross, disease. They're gonna keep staying in one population, keep staying in the other population, making impact. You don't know, but it's always a problem. So, and you're gonna end up to have this kind of, hotspot where you have this kind of disease that is spreading, and we're talking about with spotting bat about some of the zoonoses, and tahr is still a ruminant that can manifest some of the zoonoses, and then the hunters are there, and these are things that have to be considered by the hunters. So it's better to have a nice population. It's better you go out there. You don't have to harvest, every time you put your feet on the mountain. I mean, me and Ulrich stayed in the full month of October. We harvest 2 animals. We
Yep.
climbing the full October. Full October. I mean, we stayed at home probably 10 days, spreading, making trips and trips. What I enjoy about that was exploring. About
Yeah.
2 animals were enough for eating. I mean, my sister-in-law, that she has a house in Christchurch. She still left. She called me the other day and she said, "How are you?" and stuff. And she said, "Oh, by the way, your tahr is still in my freezer. Sometimes I just take a small bag and I cook it. It's awesome." And she's not buying beef. She's eating tahr with 2 animals killed in a full month. So that means there was enough to to give food for 3 people for probably a period of 2 months and a half. So, but what I enjoy is exploring. So that means that when I get there, probably I can't kill that tahr because it's far away, for probably the terrain is shit, and I can't kill it. But at least, wow, you look at that tahr and say, amazing, amazing.
Yeah. Only other animal apart from a lion to have a mane.
Yeah.
They're a phenomenal animal. Phenomenal.
They are.
They're brutish, the gorilla-like. Like, it's the.
That's another aspect, actually, that we can open and stay here for hours and talking about that, because it's a huge topic. It's a huge topic, actually. It's gonna be even one of the longest podcasts I've done since the beginning. We didn't do so many. Is the 10th today with you, but I mean, my relationship with tahr started at university when my professor were studying tahr in Nepal, and I was just a kid, a student, And I was like, wow, I wanted to go. I didn't have the money to go to Nepal. I didn't have even the physical preparation to go there. One of my professors almost lost two fingers during the expedition and research in Nepal. So you don't go just there as a tourist. And I was so impressed. And then New Zealand happened, and I say, why New Zealand is because wow, so I can understand a little bit more about the biology of the tar that my professor was studying in Nepal. So now
Yeah.
again, we can see what you said at the beginning. Said Nepal, there is a population, probably that population is suffering, and then New Zealand has another population, probably is an established herd. So look how the research can cross each other, between the two countries. And there are good research actually that I've done in New Zealand about tar. There are so many articles that I have downloaded, and I have read a couple of those, and they are just amazing, amazing. There are so many questions still about the ethology of this animal, and in terms of biology, it's an animal that it's a chimera. It's half of a half. Even the Latin name, say metragus, it's half goat. What is the rest? So you guys, are killing actually half goats. You don't know what is the other half, but half goat is roaming on
Pretty
your.
tasty.
So, but by the way, actually, I think that is even your fault a little bit in New Zealand. It's a little bit your fault, I have to say, because stop to call them tar and giving them a little bit more justice. Because I mean, tar is good, a native language in Nepal. Probably they can understand why they call him tar, but calling tar sounds like, I don't know, just like transport company, chewing gum. Damn it, those are lion goat, man. And when you see puff on top of the peaks, they're
Oh,
just
it's phenomenal.
on top of
It's
the
phenomenal.
peak of a mountain, and I don't know how many feet, and they are just fighting with gravity, against
Oh, look,
gravity, and
there's yeah, it's you see a big old puffball gorilla-like bull tar standing on a ridge line that you're looking at, going, that's sheer. I don't know how he got up there,
yeah,
and he's having the wind, the howling, icy cold wind through the rut, just like smash his coat, and you can just see it just waving everywhere, and it's a sight to behold.
that's
It
one
is
of the best
honestly a
image.
sight to behold, and
Yeah,
it's there's such a big brutish, the bulls anyway. They're so big and brutish, and you're just looking at them. How are you walking with such grace? And then you
yeah,
start seeing the couple bulls fight on their near vertical faces and cliffs and stuff, and like one of them's getting smashed down the face, and he's running backwards down this thing that, like, I'd be using bloody ropes and ice climbing gear and rock climbing gear all to just to get up it. And I'm like, how are you running backwards down it whilst getting smashed in the head by another bull tar? Like, it's horrendous.
yeah. It's
It's
horrendous.
glorious.
Yeah.
It's
And one
breathtaking.
one bad thing is also is like this animal actually never has to be introduced in New Zealand and never has to be slaughtered. So
No,
that's
look,
another part that's kind of sad. You
they,
think
they've
about it.
they've been here 116 years since 1904. Okay, they were here and established before our national parks were. They're part of our national parks. They're part of our hunting heritage. They're part of who we are as Kiwis. Now, we're a population of 5 million. Maybe it's only 50,000 hunters within New Zealand who are doing it, but it's still 50,000. There's a large proportion of overseas hunters who are coming over, and it's like sheep hunting in the States is massive. If you want to hunt in similar terrain, if you want to hunt in something that is unique, tar hunting in New Zealand. Like it, if
Yeah.
you're a mountain hunter, it is a pinnacle.
Yeah.
It is a pinnacle.
Yeah, I
Not
know.
not not goats in Alaska or Dall sheep or whatever. You come hunt tar in New Zealand in West Coast or Mount Cook, that type of area, and some of that terrain. Our peaks might not be as high as in the Himalayas, but it is some phenomenal country.
Yeah, yeah, and start to feel all the Spaniard in my body now, remembering in that thick vegetation.
Oh, mate. my greatest fear in life is face planting into a Spaniard. It's I just
you
that
know,
stuff's scary.
you know what happened after a while. I was so KO. I was so tired. Then I start to grab the Spaniard because I have to bring up my
Rookie,
body. Was I say I don't care. I
rookie,
don't care. I don't care. I was grabbing like that and that.
rookie.
Wow. So, but anyway, yeah. So anyway, that was an impressive podcast, and I have really an amazing talk with you, Patrick. I'm really impressed about how you deal with this problem that is affecting actually your land, and the passion that you have. It's admirable, and yeah, really happy that we had this talk together. Um, at the same time, is one of the most sad podcasts that I've had. Normally, we laugh a lot. But this one is a little bit unique, and the topics we touched are tough actually, are tough, and they don't make you feel good actually. So thank you so much, Patrick. Keep it up,
No worries, mate.
and
Sorry about the verbal diarrhea. I have had a couple shots of coffee beforehand, but
no, it was amazing. It was
yeah,
perfect actually, and I really thank you. You show an impressive view of the matter. So really, I'm so happy. You were lovable, and
I don't
another
know about that, mate.
couple of things. We're gonna put the link under in the description of the this podcast, because as well we're gonna share on YouTube, so you guys
Yep.
can see a little bit the faces. It's good, but it's gonna be available on the other podcast platforms. But we're gonna put the link of the Tahr Foundation, the petition. We really think it's worth it. Keep a little bit. I mean, take your time, just read it, and it's up to you, sign or not. But I think it's for every hunter has to face this moment. And as well, it will be the link for the donation. Tahr Foundation, it's New Zealand Tahr Foundation is doing an enormous job fighting these goals. So we really want they share a couple of beers with them. Even $5, I don't think is that economic effort, but spread the words. If we are a lot, even that $5 can make a change. Okay, good.
Yeah, before I go, there's a couple things on the change.org website for the petition. Don't donate there. That money goes to change.org, not actually to the Tahr Foundation. So you want to go onto
Give a little. It's
the
called like
Give
that.
a Little.
Give a little.
Yep, it's a Give a Little. New Zealand Tahr Foundation website, they've got a piece about Tahr 101, which basically breaks down the history. It's pretty unbiased. There's a bit of bias in there, so just read it. Some of the things that I've been talking about are the Tahr management plan. If you want to have a read of that, you can find that. Educated Hunter podcast. They're again another really good one to get a pretty unbiased. Again, it's by Willie Dooley, who's a spokesperson for the Tahr Foundation. So they're, depending on how you want to listen to it, there could be a bit of bias, but I think it's pretty straightforward and up and down, basically saying how things are. But really, guys, just get in behind it. Like the reality of it is like, this is for New Zealand. This is just the start.
Yeah.
And as you've alluded to previously, there Franco, is that we as hunters need to stick together on this. Even as I've said, even amongst my mates, we're divided on how we want to go do things. So it's one of those things that if we don't start getting together and making sure that we're all together on these things, and some people might have more moderate or more extreme views on how things should be done, but if we don't start working together, we're going to lose it. And again, there's issues everywhere. Basically, no system on the management or conservation side of things for hunting is perfect. But I think we need to start really looking at making sure that, say, European hunters are getting the support that they need to make sure that they're not losing out on that side of things, and us on this side of things aren't losing out on these beautiful, stunning tahr, and what's going on in the States and worldwide doesn't lose out on. And then without even getting into Africa, the African side of things as well.
Yeah.
So we as hunters need to work together. So yeah.
Good. Hug. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. Thank you so much, Patrick. See you. Thank you.
No worries, mate. Have a good one.
Bye. Bye.
See you, bro.
Bye.